Today I'm literally sitting in my yard, and this plant has been whispering to us ever since we started making these little videos. When's it gonna be my turn? Hey, let's visit. And so today we are here with the lovely ground ivy. Just to give you a picture of where I am, there's literally like house, gravel, side hill, some seriously invasive 100-year-old goutweed, and down the hillside we've got a tiny little bit of blooming purple gill over the ground, also known as ground ivy, and many other fun names maybe we'll visit on today. But as you can see, it becomes part of the grass, and in a pasture where cows graze, it really will take over. It will become the plant. As you can see, the ivy, the ground ivy, called such because it really does resemble ivy, basically like English ivy. And we've got leaves that are opposite on the stalk, and a pretty little purple Lamiaceae or mint family flower here at the top. And you may, I really remember this plant from childhood, as you may, because plants' goal in life is to go to seed. And because this plant frequents the yard, we often find that it continues to flower all the time because it gets mowed all the time and its flowers become obsolete. And so today, because the ground ivy is really covering everywhere around here, I asked if I could pick a little bit, and this one that we had just been looking at came with us. And it's just lovely and upright, and as it continues to grow upright, it will then fall down and root in the ground and become like a creeping ivy, a ground ivy, or a gill over the ground. It's a really sweet one to just pot up and bring into the house in the winter, and often does well. So if you smell it, Mrs. Maud Greaves, in her Modern Herbal many moons ago, calls this plant smell balsamic. And I would say, from watching people's reactions when we're really like tasting and smelling this plant, it kind of hurts when they know it's a mint and they taste it, because it's not minty. It's really very grounding. It's got a deep, almost bitter sort of flavor to it. But this plant is incredible in its medicinal abilities. So let's just check into them right now. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to grab my little French press pot of water. I just literally boiled it and brought it out here with us. And there's 8 ounces in here. And I'm gonna put 1 teaspoon of fresh herb, the fresh gill over the ground, or ground ivy, into my pot of tea and steep it for about 20 minutes covered while we're out here together. So I'm garbling the leaves off of the stem. Thank you, ground ivy. And I'm going to put it into my little French press that I reserve for tea. Not that I don't drink coffee. And I'm just going to thank you, ground ivy. A teaspoon's not a lot, and I'm finding the plants everywhere. Isn't that fun? The closer that we look, the more we can just find that they are in abundance, if they are. And this plant is often in abundance if we find it. So we're just putting about a teaspoon of the above ground parts, leaf and flower. We're discarding the stems back into the grass. We don't put any chemicals on this soil here, so it's a pretty safe spot. And I have my teaspoon of herb in here in my just boiled water, and I'm going to cover it and wait about 20 minutes. Yeah, so basically this plant is like an amazing contemporary plant for us, right? Ground ivy is an antiviral, it's an expectorant, and it's been really specifically indicated in pulmonary issues, pneumonia specifically, and used for consumption. So if the lungs, the old great herbal word of consumption, where the lungs are consumed with mucus. And we're very familiar with this condition in this place and time in our lives, and it might be really wise just to be going out into the yard in the mornings or the afternoons whenever we find we have time, and utilizing our relationship with the land to make a little offering, and pick a teaspoon of ground ivy to put in a cup of hot water, and have some ground ivy as a preventative, as a health booster for ourselves during each day. If used medicinally in a situation where we do need an antiviral or where our lungs are consumed with mucus, we would then use 3 to 4 cups a day. Ground ivy, also really fun and interesting if any of you are home brewers, is used as a clarifying agent for beer. And I remember my husband Joe was really into brewing beer many years ago, so many years ago that it was before we had kids, and it's this long process. And at the end, he would purchase Irish moss or sometimes ground ivy in these little bags that cost like $10, right? Because it would be the clarifying agent for the beer that he had just home brewed. It was a really popular thing to put in beer before hops came along, and that's a whole other story. With hops actually being regulated as the thing that needed to be the only bittering agent in beers. And so, as we're talking about ground ivy, it does impart a little bit of a bitter flavor to whatever beverage we might put it in. It's a wild edible, and it's just a really lovely, also, when I think of ground ivy, I think in the body, what it's doing is moving outward what is potentially toxifying or not, cleansing from the body. In that sense, it's a diuretic, so it helps the kidneys. It is a diaphoretic, so it helps us sweat. And it's an anti-inflammatory. So, I mean, really can't go wrong. It's a mild plant that packs a super strong medicinal punch. It's a European native, and we find ground ivy in most lawns that we walk upon. So take a look, befriend a ground ivy, and this is my formerly brewed cup of tea, but I hope that you enjoy, on a cool night like this summer night we're having here in Vermont, a sweet little cup of ground ivy. Feel free to put a nice teaspoon of honey in it and really enjoy it with the people you surround yourself with these days. Thanks so much for joining us.